Hello and welcome back to my channel. It is slowly becoming my favorite time on BookTube. We are already in the swing of things with Vlogmas. Obviously we have the actual queen of Vlogmas, Lauren, doing her videos. Heather and Jenny have come back after a BookTube hiatus to do Vlogmas. I'm watching Stephanie, I'm watching Bird and Sean, and of course Karen, but we are also slowly getting to those end of year favorite lists. And I know we have a few weeks left in the year, but since I don't have any non-fiction books left on my immediate TBR, I feel quite confident to present to you my favorite non-fiction books of 2023. Of course, I have to give the usual disclaimer. These are books I read in 2023, not necessarily books that were published in 2023. Now, 2023 wasn't the best year for non-fiction for me. I looked at my stats of last year compared to this year, and last year I read 38% non-fiction compared to 24% this year, and just overall I felt way more drawn to fiction this year, which is fine. But then I look back at the non-fiction books I read this year, and I see that there were some really great non-fiction books there, and I get really determined to read more non-fiction because I do love it. I ended up with a stack of 5 books, all in very different genres, that I feel like is a really good representation of the kind of non-fiction that I like to read. And I'm gonna talk to them sort of in order of least favorite to most favorite. I think this is the order for now anyway. And I'm gonna start small, and I only meant in size. And in title. That is A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. I read this for surely September this year, and I think it's only like 81 pages, but for the size of it, it really packs a punch. I would say it's like a long form essay. And the author starts by showing you Antigua, which is the Caribbean island where Jamaica Kincaid was born and raised. She shows you around as if you were a tourist. The first sentence literally is, if you go to Antigua as a tourist, this is what you will see. But then it quickly goes behind that facade and shows you what life is like for Antiguan people who live there year-round, and then what needs to be done to keep up that facade. It's about the long-lasting effects of slavery and colonialism, and how that led to poverty and corruption. And what I really loved about this book is that it is clear that Jamaica Kincaid loves this island, but she also feels like it's not her home anymore and it feels ruined, and she's very clear about who's to blame for that, and that is white people, whether they were slavers or colonists in the past, or more recently investors or tourists. I think it only just got out from under British rule for like a decade at the time that this was written. But yeah, she's very clear in saying who she feels has ruined the island of Antigua. I didn't mark down the exact quote, so I am paraphrasing here, but she said something along the lines of, I'm sure there are nice white people out there, they are the ones that stay away from this island. And what I like that she's not trying to make this book more palatable for a white audience. She's angry, she's bitter, she's sad, and that really comes through in this book. It has this really refreshing honesty and directness that I really appreciated. Her writing is really beautiful and really eloquent, but she's definitely not beating around the bush with this one. So yeah, this was just a really, really good surprise. The next book is The Transgender Issue by Shawn Fay. This is a book where she addresses issues that transgender people face in modern day society, and I love this because it was such a good introduction to the topic, and I felt like it's a really foundational text. Like I said, in this the author talks about issues transgender people face, and she says, like, the media will have you believe that the biggest issues we deal with are whether or not a trans woman can use the women's bathroom, or whether we can use our preferred pronouns, which is obviously a very reductive way to look at transgender people, and actual problems that they face are a lot more complex, a lot more broad, and a lot more impactful on a person's life. So she talks about issues in the medical field, the workplace, society in general, and also the role of trans people within the LGBTQ community and within the feminist movement. And she argues in this book that fighting for trans rights and bringing up these issues will be beneficial for society as a whole, but especially for other minor communities. And I really liked how the book is so intersectional in this way. For me, it really showed how some of these issues interlink and connect, and how it is difficult to talk about transgender issues on their own when they are so closely tied to things like racism, misogyny, classism. You can't really talk about one without mentioning the other. And I really found the way that Shawn Fay explained this was very clear and very comprehensive. So yeah, for me this was a favorite because I feel like it's just one of those must-read books, and everyone would benefit to learn more on this topic. And then the third book I want to talk about today is the book I've brought up in conversation the most this year. Where I said, like, I read this book recently, and did you know that? And that is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So this is the only science-based book on the list this year, and one of the few I read in 2023, and I would definitely love to read more next year. Anyway, this is all about the science of sleep and dreaming. So it talks about how sleep works, what your brain does during sleep and during dreaming, but also very much about what we don't know about sleep. It talks about the benefits of sleep and how your body reacts both immediately and on the long term when you don't get enough sleep, and how it recovers but also doesn't recover when you try to catch up on sleep. It is definitely a science-heavy book in that it talks about scientific studies, how those studies were set up to do studies on sleep, and what conclusions you can draw from them. But I feel like it's very accessible. I don't have a science background, but I could follow it quite easily, and the author writes in a very compelling way. So even though it's very science heavy, it's definitely not boring or dense. I learned so much about the importance of sleep in this book, and as someone who works in healthcare, I think about this book all the time, and I talk about what I learned in this book all the time as well. So I think this is a must-read for everyone who works in healthcare, also for teachers, and just in general, I think everyone would benefit from reading this. I think the only people I would hesitate to recommend it to is to people who suffer from actual insomnia, just because this is not a self-help book. It does have some general tips for healthier sleep in the back, but mostly it just talks about how much you're screwed if you don't sleep well. So if you have an occasional bad night's sleep, I think this book will be great for you. But if you suffer from insomnia, I'd say contact a medical professional. So yeah, that's my little side note. Other than that, I think this is a really, really brilliant book. And yeah, I'd suggest you pick it up. So the next book I want to talk about may have a little bit of recency bias, because I only just finished it last week. But this book was such a surprise and I had such a good time reading it, that I still wanted to put it on this list. And that is A Line in the World, A Year on the North Sea Coast by Dr. Norse, and this is translated from the Danish by Caroline Waite. So first I wanted to quickly talk to you about the book as an object, because it probably added at least a little enjoyment of the book. So I really like the cover. It's like it's a depiction of a coast, but then also it probably doesn't pick up the color very well, but it just has this beautiful sand color, which I thought was really fitting because it talked about the coast. And then it also has these really beautiful sketches at the beginning of each chapter. Let me find some. Which were done by Signe Parkins. I think it really shows like how a publisher can really take care of a book as a physical object and just put in that little extra that makes reading a book really special. This was published by Pushkin Press, which is a great indie publisher. So anyway, this is kind of an essay collection, memoir. Now, how do I explain this? So Dr. Norse has decided, after living in various big cities around the world, to move back to rural Denmark and travel up and down the North Sea coast, all the way from the tip of Denmark down along the Danish coast to Germany and to the northernmost parts of the Netherlands. So in here she writes about her travels and the different places she visits, and it ends up being this beautiful hybrid of personal stories, nature writing, travel writing, history, all with the pull of the North Sea. It's about how the sea influenced so many things. It influenced the landscape, the weather, the people and their habits and tradition, language as well. And I loved how the author just weaves it all together and captures the essence of being on the North Sea coast. And it doesn't matter where she is on the coast, in like different countries. The sea just has such an influence on the way of life of people living there, that like, someone living on the coast in Denmark will be more similar in a way to someone living on one of the Wadden Islands in the north of the Netherlands than, say, to someone living in Copenhagen, even though that is the same country and the other one isn't. Yeah, I really, really love this. It makes me want to travel. I'm already making travel plans inspired by this book. Yeah, it just made me so excited about an area in the world that maybe is kind of unassuming in its natural beauty, but doesn't make it any less spectacular. So yeah, that is A Line in the World by Dr. Norse. Now I'm gonna be a bit cheeky and put in an honorable mention. It's a memoir, and it doesn't hold a candle to the one I'm going to be talking about in a minute. Also, I haven't quite finished it yet, so I didn't want to put it on my actual favorites, but I do feel like it deserves a mention because it's definitely making an impact. And that book is A Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I'm about halfway now, and her life, basically from when she was a late teen, was such a downward spiral that could have been turned around at so many points if she just had someone who had her actual best interest at heart and looked out for her, and signaled all those blatantly obvious signs that she wasn't doing well, and you know, not try to ride on her success. So yeah, it's just so sad and heartbreaking to realize how incredibly lonely and desperate she has felt for such a long time. The book has gotten some critique in being poorly written, even with the use of a ghostwriter, and I'd say, you know, it's not the best, but it's not at all bad. I feel like it's very genuine, and I don't think it should have been written in any other way. I'm listening to the audiobook read by Michelle Williams, and she does a stunning job with this. Yeah, it really just has grabbed me by the throat, and I think it will stick with me for a long time. So yeah, that was my little side tangent, but my absolute favorite non-fiction book of the year is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is my favorite by far. I loved all the books I talked about today, but this is like in a league of its own. So this is Chanel Miller's memoir. She was known for a long time by the name Emily Doe. She was raped on the Stanford College campus, and her attacker got an incredibly light sentence for that crime. She then wrote a victim impact statement on her experience, which then went viral overnight. And this is her story of that attack and the court case and the aftermath of that. I was incredibly late to this book. Everyone has already read it. So I don't think I really need to get into what this book is about anymore. The writing of this is just stunning. I said in my review, in my last wrap-up, that Chanel Miller is a writer first and foremost, a writer at her core. She wrote before she was assaulted, she wrote during the events of the book, and probably will write after that. She writes so thoughtfully. She's very precise in telling her feelings and how the events had impacted her life. She just has a really wonderful way with words. Obviously, this book deals with a very difficult topic, not only the assault itself, but also the impact of this very long and grueling and ultimately unfair court case. Victim blaming is a big part of this story. So this is a book that made me feel angry. It made me feel a lot of righteous indignation. But also, you know, whether or not you've been through something similar, there is this sense of solidarity when reading this book. It makes you feel powerful as a woman. I think in the way that Chanel Miller writes so honestly and vulnerable, she creates a space for everyone who has been scared or not believed, and she tells them that your feelings and uncertainties and pain are all valid. So even though this book made me feel sad and angry, it was sad and angry in a good way, if that makes any sense at all. Yeah, this was just really, really spectacular. Absolutely my top non-fiction book of 2023. So here they are, all my favorite non-fiction books of 2023. Like I said, there's always a chance that I will read another favorite If I do, I will let you know, but I feel pretty good about this tag. I would love to focus a bit more on non-fiction next year, especially when I see these books together, and when I was going through my non-fiction books I read in 2023. I remembered that I do love a good non-fiction, and there's so many non-fiction books out there that I still want to read. If you are doing your own non-fiction favorite videos, please direct me to them so I can watch them. I can watch them all. If you don't have your own channel, of course, I'd love to know your favorite non-fiction books of 2023. Yeah, I would love to have a chat in the comments. That is it for today. I hope you will all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.